evaluate understanding the situation in which we are living in. When we look at this situation where we are living in, we see the vulnerabilities, we see the issues that make young people vulnerable to abuse, things that make women vulnerable to abuse, things that continue to render women and girls vulnerable and susceptible to violence. And we begin to work to change them because it is possible to change the narrative. We believe that we are the agents of change. We believe that we have the capacity to change the systems and the things that oppress us. This year has dimmed orange the world, and violence now should continue to be a kairos call for all of us, that maybe in one way or another, we have condoned violence. Maybe one way or another, we have perpetrated violence. Maybe in one way or another, we have made it thrive because we saw it happen and said nothing. The kairos moment for us is to know it is now, time is now that we end violence. Time is now that we bring violence to an end. In that we speak out against it, we act against it, we advocate against it, and we move together so that the way we have been told that men and women are created in the image of God, that image of God in each human being, which is inherent in each human being, can be realized through our interpersonal relationships and also our intrapersonal relationships. I welcome you as we deliberate together in this last day of the 16 days of Activism 2021. I welcome you to self-examine yourself, self-examine your organization, self-examine your church, and let us do an M&D to see where we need to put a new gear, even as we look forward to 2022, where we need to put a new effort, even as we look to next year, so that we can continue fighting for gender justice and standing for gender justice, so that the fullness of life that Christ dare and die for can be experienced by all God's people. May the Lord bless you. I pray that we'll be blessed together. I pray that this moment will be such a blessing for each one of us. God bless you so much. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you so much, our dear regional coordinator, for welcoming us. As we move forward, I'd like to also recognize our colleagues who have joined us from wherever you are. Thank you. I welcome you. I welcome lecturers from the theological institutions within Eastern Africa. I welcome our matriarch and lecturer, our mentor, our teacher, Professor Esther Mombo. I welcome Bishop Yona Katonene from Uganda. Yes, and all religious leaders that have joined the discussion. Thank you so very much for being part of this dialogue. As we move forward, I request you please to register your name in the chat. Drop your name together with your mobile money telephone number. And please do that using the country code, so that it will be easier for the one in charge to know that this number is from Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, or any other country. So today we are going to have two facilitators. We are going to have one taking us through a session on trauma healing and management in the context of Sdbv. And then we shall also have the second facilitator speaking to us or helping us evaluate the church's response to Sdbv within the region. I'd like to begin by inviting us into the session on trauma healing and management, which is going to be facilitated by our sister Dativ, all the way from Rwanda. So Dativ, I'll request you to unmute, introduce yourself to us, and then take us through the session. Yes, Dativ. Dativ, unmute.
Okay. Hi.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yes, I'm happy. It was so difficult to connect.
Dative, have we lost you?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, please. The microphone is over to you to take us through the session.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Can I start my presentation on trauma healing?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I'm Dative Nakabonye. I am from Rwanda. Yes, I'm the founder and the executive director of a local NGO for women rights, which is called Family Circle Love Lab Organization. And I'm happy now to share with you about trauma healing and Sdbv. Yes, in the WCC webinar. Yeah. Like an introduction of my presentation, I wish to say that through the world, it is estimated that 1 in 3 women will experience some form of gender-based violence throughout her lifetime, threatening her quality of life and overall well-being as she navigates healing and recovery after these experiences. The physical and emotional distress caused by GBV, especially the intimate partner violence, sexual violence, harassment, stalking, can impact survivors long after their perpetrators is out of their life. Do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I continue to say that some social adverse and psychological effects related to intimate partner violence and sexual assault and child abuse have been well identified. The example they used to give is the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms that victims can experience after the events. Also, the substance use, as we can observe it in my organization, women are now overuse the substances like alcohol abuse and so some suicidal ideas, the depression, eating disorders, and anxiety. It is just few consequences of gender-based violence, sexual gender-based violence, but there are also other many, as you can know. But different scholars, they have shown also other consequences such as the injuries that the victim can have, fear, and stress associated with gender-based violence have also been linked to physical health problems such as chronic pain syndrome, gastrointestinal disorders, somatic complaints. Like women here, they used to say, I have pain on my back, I have pain in my stomach, I have pain on my legs, I have pain everywhere. And the gastrointestinal disorders, somatic complaints, fibromyalgia, and gynecological disorders. Those are problems that victims of sexual gender-based violence can present. There are also the impact of gender-based violence beyond symptoms burden, like there's beyond physical and mental health symptoms. GBV can affect survivors on many personal, social, and spiritual levels, impacting their ability to connect to themselves. Often they are like disconnected from themselves. They are disconnected from the rest of the world in which they live. Yeah, around them. These are the most problems that they can you can observe from the victims of Sdbv victims. For example, many survivors struggle to build their identities and self-concept after these experiences as they seek to find meaning. It is not easy for victims of Sdbv to find the word, even the word, to explain what they have experienced. It is not easy. They are like lost. Other survivors experience difficulties, embraces their freedom or feeling the power to direct their own lives as they attempt to gain feelings of self-efficacy, competence, and confidence. The impact of violence goes well beyond impacting selfhood. Survivors also can struggle to build trust in themselves and those around them, making it difficult for them to build and maintain new relationships. Yeah. The negative feeling and worldviews can also perpetuate challenges for survivors as they seek to build a positive outlook and recognize their potential. But this can happen unless they had good support, good social support. Despite these difficulties and challenges, healing after Sdbv, it is possible. It is possible to heal after gender-based violence when they get good support. Current quantitative instruments to measure and document this process holistically, however, has been limited. Therefore, the purpose of this presentation is to say that healing after gender-based violence is possible. The reason why we have to always support victims of gender-based violence. According to Allen and Wozniak, their authors, recovering from abuse is a social, spiritual, cultural, and psychological process. From the perspectives of survivors, healing is non-linear. It requires active recovery engagement and consists of integrating one's trauma into their selfhood as they move toward their future goal. Yeah. It is then important to understand that the healing is a process for Sdbv problems. And for example, women that we receive in my organization, they used to get individual counseling through which we hear them. We can hear them. We can also support them in finding good words or some suitable words to explain what happened to them. It is not always evident that victims of sexual gender-based violence can find words to explain what happened to them. It is not easy because the trauma linked to sexual gender-based violence is huge and also it's terrible that victims are sometimes and most of the time they are lost. Yes, the management of symptoms is critical element of recovery. Yes, and healing must be evaluated holistically using survival relevant concepts to give a more accurate understanding of this process in relation to other variables. There exist different variables in trauma healing, but to help survivors to understand that, it is very important. Yeah. What I can say also is that in healing process also, we use group discussion. Through group discussion, it is something that can help women in general in their groups to understand what sexual gender-based violence is. How is it? Because some of them cannot even identify or recognize that something that happened to them is violence. But discussing it in groups, they give different ideas and it helps them to discuss openly without talking to personal personal problems, but in a general framework. This gives them the opportunity to understand that sexual gender-based violence really exists, and through this discussion, it opens the opportunity for victims to seek for the individual counseling that I talked about before. What the other thing that we do, it is a trauma healing process that we do in group through a program which is called EMDR. Through EMDR, it is eye movement desensitization processing. Through it, we do the healing using eye movement, where we focus on the traumatic events that the victims have experienced. Through that process of healing, which normally takes 6 weeks, it helps them to identify and to give the value to the traumatic events they have experienced. It is very important for our victims, for our women, for example, in the organization and within the community, to have this healing process through EMDR. And then after we do the evaluation, to understand at which level the victim has been traumatized. And after that, then we can proceed with the individual counseling. I think I can stop my presentation here and give the audience, if they have some questions to ask to me, no problem. And if you have something to add, it's okay. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to me.
Hey, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, dear Dativ, for that wonderful presentation. I'll now open the platform or the floor to us. If you have a comment or a question, you can put it forward and we engage with the presenter. Anyone with a question or a comment? You can use the reactions on the chat to raise up your hand and I'll call you out to unmute and speak. You can also use the chat. Yes, meanwhile, thank you so much, Dativ, for bringing to us the importance of ensuring that we promote healing from the trauma that people who have been affected by Sdbv are concerned. The church is a healing community, and when Sdbv occurs, then we need not to abandon the victims or the survivors. We need to work together to ensure that they can recover from the trauma that they face. Thank you so much. I am inviting you participants and friends to use the reactions to appreciate Dativ. You can clap for her. You can also unmute your camera if you want and clap, or you can use the reactions to appreciate her. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much.
Yes, you're welcome, Brian. I'm happy.
Yes, so at this very moment, I would love to invite our next speaker. Our next speaker is Reverend Mary Kategile from Tanzania, and she's going to take us through the session on the church's response to sexual and gender-based violence. I'd love to welcome the Reverend to unmute and speak to us, and I am requesting her to introduce herself to us and then take us through the next session. Reverend Mary, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. My name is Reverend Mary Kategile. I'm a lecturer at the University in Tanzania, in the city called Mbeya. And I'm involved in advocacy for women human rights, but furthermore, an advocate in, we do advocacy on gender-based violence and child protection and the likes. I am so happy to be here. I would like to welcome all of you to share what I've thought about the evaluating the church's response on sexual gender-based violence. What I will do, I will mute my video so that I can use my computer to present my, so just a moment as I deal with these technologies. I hope I can, yes, thank you so much. So first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Reverend Dr. Pauline, the regional coordinator, Brother Brian, Sister Dina Mombo, and the entire team of WEHIRE for organizing these wonderful conferences, the webinars that we share different experiences and different issues pertaining HIV and AIDS and gender-based violence and the likes. I also would like to thank all the participants who have set the time to be able to participate in this webinar as we commemorate the end of 16 days of activism in ending gender-based violence. Thank you so much all, and God bless you. My topic that I'm going to deal with will be evaluating church's response to sexual gender-based violence. To begin with, I would like to give just brief kind of definitions of what we mean when we speak of sexual gender-based violence. There are several scholars who have come up with definitions. One definition says that sexual violence refers to any act, attempt, or threat of sexual nature that results in physical, psychological, and emotional harm. Another definition says that sexual violence refers to any unwanted sexual act or activity. Therefore, we can say that there are many different kinds of sexual violence. That including, but not strictly to rape, sexual assault, child sexual abuse, sexual harassment, rape within marriage or within rape relationships, forced marriage, so-called honor-based violence, that's female genital mutilation, trafficking, sexual exploitation, and ritual abuse. So all these acts can be explained to be sexual gender-based violence. So sexual violence can be perpetrated by a complete stranger or someone known or even trusted, such as a friend, colleague, family member, partner, ex-partner, and others. And therefore, it is a form of gender-based violence. Therefore, when we are ending the commemoration of 16 days, I appreciate, as our regional director, Dr. Pauline mentioned, that we are ending the 16 days, but this is just the beginning. the beginning that we are proceeding, because we will not stop now that 16 days are ending. And therefore, we are looking into this in the future, that we continue doing this. And therefore, when we talk of this, sexual violence is one of the most destructive and yet least recognized human rights abuses in the world. It's very destructive, but as many as 1 in 3 women has been beaten, coerced into sex, or abused in some other way. These are the statistics that have been shared by different researchers. But most often, this has been done by someone she knows, including her husband or any other male family member. So therefore, it is important to know that sexual violence is more often experienced by women and children. However, men also can experience sexual violence. And this has been happening this also has been happening in our societies. Why? Because of abuses of power for those people who are there and the likes. And therefore, in most cases, sexual gender-based violence takes place in private or isolation location where there are no witnesses. And therefore, the evidence of an attack can be blood stains, semen, or physical injuries from the attack. And therefore, the survivor can experience physical, mental, and emotional wounds from sexual attack. And therefore, there is kind of confusion. When we speak of confusion, meaning that sometimes you don't see any of those, but someone has been sexually exploited, sexually abused. But since there is no scars or anything, therefore she or he cannot show that I've been attacked. And therefore this has been, often it is overlooked. But then sometimes this coercing, for example, people would not tell that this is something maybe as bad as the rape itself. And therefore there are several effects. 16 days activism of ending gender-based violence, we know it, that we have been doing and speaking so much in different occasions, advocating that we need to end all forms of violence, but also discrimination and the likes. It is the time when we speak of violence, we are really talking about all types. And there are very many types. To name few, they are physical, psychological, emotional, sexual, economical, cultural, health-wise, language, and the likes. All these are violence. And therefore, when we were commemorating all the activities that we have done since the 25th of November has comprised different kind of statements, declarations, activities condemning that these kind of violences are not acceptable. Now, when we speak, we look around in our societies, everyone who is here can even reflect briefly everywhere where you can see violence is everywhere. In many cases, people tend to take violence as a way of life. For example, some women being abused, they feel that maybe that's how it is. But the matter of fact, that is not acceptable. But for many years now, I have been working and struggling to empower women to say no to be able to say no to violence. And then we have discussed the issue of violence, but what I have realized that violence and especially sexual violence is so much rooted in a culture, to the extent that in order to uproot that, it needs putting up together of the ways, the collision of all the people, meaning the people in the society and all other stakeholders in order to change that. As I was reflecting on the response of the church, I came to look to see the church as an institution which only has the access or ability to reach the people at the grassroots. In other words, that we can say that the church is able to reach people from the grassroots, be it the upper class, be it the middle class, be it the lower class, be it in the rural, be it in schools, high schools, wherever. The church has that ability to reach these people. And therefore, it is one organ that can reach as many people as possible in order to bring these changes and to be able to stop sexual and gender-based violence. And what this, the church history can attest to this. Since its beginning, the church has been an instrument of change. It has been an instrument of change in all societies where it was planted. The church has been able to change bad cultures, changing people who were regarded as bad people or outcasts in their respective societies. But all because of the power of the gospel, and therefore people were changed. But furthermore, the gospel message is the gospel of love, justice, and peace. Our Lord Jesus Christ exhibited this in his earthly ministry. Now, since the church is able to reach all the people with this good news, and therefore we need to speak up. But then when I was looking on the praxis of our churches currently, I found that we, as church members, as church leaders, as Christians, we rarely speak against sexual gender-based violence. If I'm to ask everyone who is present here, when was the last time you heard your preacher or your pastor from the pulpit speaking against sexual gender-based violence? Maybe out of us, we can find maybe 2 or maybe 3 or maybe 1 or maybe even none. For the 16 days, yes, pastors and bishops have been able to speak up in different occasions. But then in our churches, in our pulpits, it's rarely being said. And therefore you see that there is kind of dualistic kind of a state, whereby we know that we do have the message that can change the people. We do have the power. Of course, it's not on our own, it's the power of Jesus Christ, which, if we use that power, can change the situation, but yet we don't use it. We don't use it simply because we don't think that maybe this is important. And therefore, the church has been silenced in most cases. It doesn't seem to be speaking against, unless in seminars and workshops. That's where many people you hear, they say, speak, and the likes. As I mentioned earlier, that in 16 days, yes, we have seen pastors speak against, bishops speak against. But in a normal life, on normal occasions, we don't speak that much. And then despite the fact that we know it, that gender-based violence and specifically sexual gender-based violence is very dangerous, but still, we do not say anything. But furthermore, the church has not been able to deliberate, to put in place the mechanism. Now, when I speak this, I know there are some churches that have been very active in doing this. But then in 100, you may find maybe 5, 10% who have been doing that. And I'm so happy about it. But the majority do not speak about these things. But furthermore, when you refer to the issues of sexual gender-based violence, the church has been blamed to say that, well, it has been silence. And sometimes that the church has been used to keep or to protect the perpetrators of sexual and gender-based violence. In which sense? Basically, in issues of counseling, couple would be having problems, and one of them has been violated to the extent that he or she lives in pain. And in most cases, for a little bit of experience that I have, I see many women suffering. But then the church would say, well, you know what, you need to tolerate, and then we are praying about it. But when you do that, you are sending these people back into a dangerous and abusive relationship, while you have not really addressed the problem. So in this case, the church has seemed like protecting the perpetrators. But furthermore, you realize that since the church is silent, does not condemn these things unless it is outrageous. It's like when you hear there is something which is political, then we as church leaders, we speak up. But then when it comes to domestic violence, most often it's taken as a private. I have few examples. One example is that a girl was raped, a child was raped by an uncle in the home. But then in trying to take steps, they said, well, you know what, you cannot do this, because if you say this, then your uncle will be jailed. In Tanzania, for example, if this case is taken to court, then a person will be sentenced to 30 years in jail. And therefore, the family decided to settle it silently. But this girl has been wounded, and the pain she suffered will last for the whole time of her life. So you see, it is a problem. And this girl, when she tried to go and speak to the pastor, then the pastor said, well, you know, I'll talk with your father. And when the pastor spoke to the father said, we have finished this in a family way. So you can see that still this girl did not get her justice. And therefore, you see that there is this sexual gender-based violence. It is a problem, and it's a big one. It is an undeniable truth that women, children are suffering a lot, but men also are suffering. But if the church, which has been entrusted to take care of the creation, to take care of the people, to help them know their rights, to live in fullness while embracing the salvation, living peacefully with themselves, but also with the society, then if the church does not take that responsibility, then where are we going? And therefore, we come to the point whereby it is due time now to break the silence within the church. We need to break the silence within the church. That will be the only way to free the people. When I was trying to think, I said, well, what are the reasons? Are the reasons for that causes sexual and gender-based violence? There have been some scholars who have made some research. They came up with eight reasons that causes gender-based violence and also sexual gender-based violence. One reason was that we're having policies that do not adhere to equality of men and women. And this can go in line with what Dr. Pauline said earlier concerning structures. Now, these structures, if they cannot be challenged by the people of the church, or for us who know, then people will continue to suffer. The second reason, they said that women have been denied participation in decision-making bodies. That also causes gender-based violence, but as well as sexual gender-based violence. Number three, they said perception of seeing women as second-class citizens. That means when a woman says no, people think that she's saying yes. Since she is underlooked, then what she says will not be taken seriously. So that also is a reason as to why violence continues. Number four, they said that wrong perception towards gender roles. Now, this has gender roles are so strong, they're cultural, and in the society you have that. So people have wrong perception. When you speak about gender equality, people think that men would say, well, do you mean I should wash the dishes? Why really? That does not mean that. Reason number five has been patriarchal system. Patriarchal system meaning that, in this sense, to mean that, well, women cannot speak in front, cannot be taken seriously. We have few tribes in Tanzania whereby they are said that women should keep silence, and they refer to the Bible, whereby we see that there is a misinterpretation. In these tribes, then when a woman speaks, they say, well, look at this woman. She's talking in front of people. People meaning that she's talking in front of men. So this this patriarchal system is the way they regard women are, and therefore they wouldn't listen to women. But furthermore, number six is poverty. A scholar from Nigeria wrote that poverty in Africa has a female face. And therefore, because of that, then many people disregard what people are suffering, specifically women and girls and children as well. When they are suffering and struggling, they're being violated, their rights denied, but still they don't care. Number seven, the silence of the society towards violence actions, including protecting perpetrators. Now, this is also the reason why violence continues. The society's silence. When it happens in the home, when it happens somewhere, they feel like that is a family thing or it's a family business. But number eight is that lack of knowledge on the effects of violence in families and societies. So you see that there is a lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, lack of information. What are the effects of sexual gender-based violence? What are the effects? While we know that the effects of this, Sister Martha, just the first presenter mentioned, that there are so many kind of effects. The trauma people suffer from violence. But since people do not have that knowledge, they continue doing this, taking on the violence and violating women, girls, children, and men as well. And therefore, my brothers and sisters, what I see is that this is a problem. Yes, the church has been doing something, but what I would say that it's not doing enough. It's not doing enough. As we are ending the 16 days, it should be now we are starting now to break the silence. The church should break the silence. We should preach and speak, have a proper interpretation of texts that we read in the Bible. We should also condemn all the violent actions that we hear, that we see. Because if we do that, people will listen. Because this is the mandate that we have been given as the church. And therefore, if we do this, then we should expect to see some changes in behavior. And when should this education take place? It should take in our worship services, take place there. We can start with that. Because when you speak, people will listen. Just planning. I remember the congregation where I worship just a year ago, maybe 2 years now, 2 years ago. Once it was spoken concerning, then the pastor planned to have this kind of a talk. During the preaching, then they said, well, now let us have someone talk about gender-based violence. It was once since I started worshiping in that church. This is about 20 years ago. So the pastors and leaders, we do have a chance to educate our people in order to end the violence. I believe that it is possible if you and I will take our stance, I'll take our responsibility and stand and pray that God gives us wisdom and will to do it. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reverend Mary, all the way from Tanzania, for taking us through that, looking at the church's response to Sdbv. You know, you have told us that the church has been seen, you know, protecting perpetrators of Sdbv in its response. And you have also told us that the church has denied women full participation in decision-making. You've also mentioned that at times the Bible is used to silence victims and survivors of Sdbv. Thank you so much for that presentation. I want to invite colleagues to engage with you and also to engage on this topic of how the church is responding to Sdbv. So if you have a comment, if you have a question, if you want to say something, use the reactions to raise your hand up, and then I'll call you to say what you want to say. Meanwhile, let's appreciate Reverend Mary using the chat. You can also unmute your camera and clap for her. You can also use the reactions, just like I have done. Yes, so we are continuing with the discussion on the church's response to sexual and gender-based violence in the region. On the call are other very senior theologians. I can see Reverend Fredibien, the General Secretary for the Anglican Church of Burundi. I can see colleagues from the circle. I'll be inviting them to make just a comment on the same. How is the church responding to Sdbv? How do we see this response, you know, helping us end the challenge of violence against women and children and men? How is the church's response helping us to and human rights violations of all kinds of manner. So as I wait for your comments on the chat, I will give a few minutes to colleagues from the circle. I'll just call each of them just at random to just engage briefly on the same on the same theme. Yes, may I begin with you, Reverend Lydia Chamei? Lydia, are you able to unmute? Okay, may I give it over to Dr. Mary? Okay, I can't hear them coming out. Well, that's okay. So thank you again, Reverend Mary. I see comments appreciating your presentation. I see Joy clapping for you there. Thank you for highlighting these points. So I want us to break into discussion. We have had an evaluation of how the church is responding to Sdbv in the region. So we need, I want us to discuss a way forward. First of all, I want us to identify the gaps and challenges in the church's response to Sdbv. And two, also suggest means through which these gaps and challenges can be addressed such that our churches can champion the end of Sdbv and all kinds of human rights violations. So we are going to discuss two questions. I am projecting them on the screen. One of the questions is identify the gaps and challenges in the church's response to Sdbv and other forms of human rights violation. And then question number two is suggest ways through which these gaps and challenges can be addressed to end Sdbv and all forms of human rights violation. So those are the questions that we are going to discuss. I request that we can take note of them. I can maybe copy them and place them in the chat. We are going to have 4 discussion groups. And in these discussion groups, we are going to spend just 20 minutes. We are going to spend 20 minutes and thereafter we shall come back here to present what we have discussed. When you reach in the discussion group, get a group leader and a secretary. Our secretary will be, the group leader will be moderating and the secretary will be taking notes and then afterwards present on behalf of the group. I'm posting the questions for us in the chat. There they are. I've posted them. You can take a screenshot. Identify the gaps and challenges in the church's response to Sdbv and other forms of human rights violation, and to suggest ways through which these gaps and challenges can be addressed to end Sdbv and all forms of human rights violations. So we shall now break our way into discussion, and then we shall convene in this space together after 20 minutes. Yes, I can see some of us here. Please join your group. I guess you can see the group where you have been sent. Hello.
Hello, Brian. Hello, Brian. Brian.